Welcome back, friends, to another Persona 5X video, getting you ready for the global launch here on June 26th, although these tips would serve you on any of the servers if you were starting somewhere else before the global launch itself. And I want to talk to you today a bit about some mistakes that I made when I first started playing on the KR server. I'm going to give you 5, although really it's more like 7. I got a 2 for 1 on a couple of these here. And what I'm going to do differently is not just tell you about the mistakes I made, but I'm going to tell you about what I will do differently on the global launch to not make these same mistakes and maybe progress a little bit better, a little bit smoother, things like that. So with it, let's dive in. These are not in a specific order, but I'll start with probably one of the biggest ones, honestly. And this was spreading my resources too thin. So let me pop into my characters here. By the way, you're going to see characters and confidants in this video, so if you don't want to know what they are and you want to go in blind, you probably want to turn the video off, but hopefully you're staying around. So here we are. These are my characters. And in the early game, what I would tell you is that it's not that hard. The first couple palaces, you can beat with just about anybody. Matter of fact, you can beat it with the basic characters they give you. So you don't have to necessarily pull, on the first limited banner or anything like that. You would do just fine with whoever they hand you. And what I did at the very beginning is I pulled quite a bit on the standard banner, and they have like a selector banner, things like that. And I started spreading my resources around a lot of characters. And so you're going to see down here, I've got things like Ryuji built up. I've got a couple levels in Moko, which is, I'm not going to recommend that. I've got some in Mont. I was running Closer. I'd actually pulled a copy of Soy. I was running him. At some point, I got Morgana. I got Lady On. I got all these different characters. And it's not to say they're not fun. It's not to say they're not great. But the game will give you a lot of resources in the beginning as you clear palaces, as you clear mementos and initial events. And it gives you this false sense of, surplus. And because you think there's this surplus of materials coming your way to level your characters and grow their weapons and everything else, you don't feel the need to save, or at least I didn't. Yeah, I should only speak of myself. And it bit me in the butt a little bit later. So, once I kind of cleared some of the palaces and mementos, it started to slow down a bit. And so then as I would get more characters, I found it harder and harder and harder to push them. Now, I will say getting up to like level, 50-ish isn't too terrible. I want to say the grind starts around, it was either 50 to 60 or it was 60 up through 80. Somewhere in that range is when it really starts to kind of compound on itself. And so you really, really, really want to think about who you want to push to 80. Again, getting up to like, 30, 40, 50, it's not quite as bad. But if you start trying to get all these characters to 80 like you see on my screen, it's going to drain you. And so what I'm going to do differently once this hits global, and again, some of this might change just based on content cycles or what they launch with. We don't actually know everything that's going to be available on day one. So, something's subject to change. But what I'll do first is focus on a main content team. I haven't fully decided who yet, but more than likely, unless they change the banner scheme, I'm probably going to pull Joker. Not probably, I will absolutely pull Joker. I'll talk about that more in a pull video. And then on super, super strong, even I would say currently you can use her. There's others that are stronger, but she is definitely one to look for. I may pull Morgana. I like the character. I like his healing. Sue me, right? So I'm going to have a main DPS. I'm going to have somebody that can heal and then probably a support in there. Haven't fully decided who yet, but that's really it. I'm going to focus down on those characters and really letting them be my main team. And then I'm probably going to pick a secondary DPS. And that's why I may end up having like Joker and On, for example. And hopefully, depending on what supports I pull, etc., that support can carry between teams. Now, some have specific synergies, like you would have like Key with, On to do like fire damage stuff. But if I get a more generic support, then they can sit on both teams. We're going to have to wait and see. Also, if there's, different SOS and stuff available at the beginning, I might need 2 teams. But I'm going to try to limit how many I want to get to the higher levels, at least in the first couple months of the game. Then as the roster kind of widens and I need more specialized teams, then I'll start thinking about really investing in more characters. So that was my first mistake, was I spread my resources too thin. And again, I'm going to combat that by being a little bit more focused on what teams I'm building, what supports I'm sharing, things like that. All right, for the next one, the next mistake I made is not using all my action points. So if you go down to the city, you'll see that I've banked up 20 here. You get 5 every single day, basically at server reset. And these are what you use to do a couple things. One is your confidant conversation / leveling up. So you'll see right here, I could, meet with a confidant. 2 is like your side activities. I happen to have 2 of the mini games here. And then like your part-time jobs, things like that. So this is where you raise your social status skills. I forget what they call these things, but this is how you raise all of that. And early on, I didn't always do this. I might have done it for dailies. Sometimes I did other things for dailies. And there was plenty of times where I sat here at cap and I didn't think about what I was losing. And you do want to spend these points because, again, you're going to raise your stats or your social stats, whatever these are called. You're going to get money, and money is helpful for things like buying items, buying gifts, which we'll talk about in a second, things like that. And of course, your confidence. That's really the biggie one, is getting them leveled up. And this is my first 2-for-1 tip of where I made a mistake. The other mistake I made is when I did talk to my confidants in these action points, I didn't bring gifts a lot of the time. I didn't know how limited money was. And as a result, I was kind of like hoarding it, right? So it's like the classic JRPG issue of not spending your resources, and I really should have been. And so let me show you something here. If I go to my confidants, the reason you want to level them, one is just for the social links to have fun with it, right? But the other is you get gifts. So every level that you bring them up, you get gems up until I think 14. You get resources, so super, super valuable. And then different confidants unlock different things. We'll do a video about this later, but for example, our Velvet Room Attendant lets you do new fusions based on leveling her up. And so with the gifts, if I go back, you'll see that she has certain things she favors. So if I were to, bring this, for example, when I'm doing her confidant, discussion or whatever you want to call it, I can get more points and level her faster, which is A, going to get me to those rewards faster, and B, it's going to make my daily use of those action points more efficient because I'm getting more every time I talk to them. So my mistakes were, 1, just not spending the points, and then 2, when I spent them on confidants, I didn't always bring gifts. And so again, going into global live, whatever you want to call it, first of all, I'm just not going to let these things bank up. And second of all, before I talk to a confidant, and it'll tell you like what's available for that day, I'm going to make sure I have that person's gift. I'm going to be ready to meet with them and give them as much as I possibly can to get as many points as I can. The other thing that's nice too, I'll give you another quick thing here. You get so many of these refills. And so you can see I've got 96 here. They just hand them out. So again, if you're stockpiling all of this, you're not really getting any benefit for it. I don't think you really need to. And so not only spending the action points, I would actually probably spend quite a bit of these added resources to refill when I have the time to do so. So that's tip number 2. Do your action points, give gifts to your confidants, be a little bit more efficient than I was. All right, number 3, let's go back to our characters. And it goes into resources, but it's a little bit more specific. And this is not being strategic with my cards. So these are the artifacts or cards. And this is, again, your gearing system. And I think this opens up level 35 to 40, somewhere in that range. I don't remember exactly, but it's right around there. And ultimately, I did a few things pretty poorly. So at first, I ignored it, which is terrible, because even if you weren't leveling up the cards themselves, just putting them on, you get these set bonuses. So for example, on this one here, with the 2 set effect, damage taken is reduced by 8%. With the 4-piece, once you enter combat, you get 25% of highlight energy. So even if you're not leveling them, matter of fact, you can see I didn't level this one, you get the bonuses. And so they're worth equipping, even if that's the only reason you're doing it. Now, I will say that leveling gold cards at 25 takes quite a bit of resources when you do it across multiple different characters, but you have lower rarity. And let me see if I have any that I haven't sold. Yeah, so I see I've got some purple. This is like 1 tier down. There's, I think, blue and gray, which I don't have any at the moment. I usually use those as fodder at this point. But with the blue and gray, you'll get those dropping a lot from like mementos, things like that. And you can throw them on your characters and level them up. You know, sometimes I would do it to level 10. Sometimes you might want to do it to 15 or even 20. And then really wait to do anything higher. And again, what I did wrong was A, not using them. B, I would occasionally take I don't know, like a set that wasn't great for the character I needed, throw it on them and then level it all the way. And so now I've wasted resources and not pulled the stats that I really needed to. And so if you're not aware, every character has like a main stat. So if I go here, you can see that she really likes attack, crit damage, crit rate, things like that. And so when I think about cards or artifacts, whatever they're called, I want to make sure that not that one, that one's always HP. I want to make sure that I'm getting main stats up here as much as I can. Now it is a little bit of a gamble system, if you will, in the sense that it's random, you don't know what you're going to get. But before you level something to 25, you want to make sure it's a pretty decent, you know, piece. So like right here, you see I've got crit damage, attack, crit rate. It's a decent card for her. So when this hits live, when this hits global, not live, it's live in other areas. When this comes to global, what I'll likely do is for my main characters is start using, you know, the gray, blue, purples as soon as they kind of come open, and maybe only level them to, I don't know, 10, 15, in some cases 20 if they're a really good card. And I'm going to let them sit there. And then when I finally get a really good gold card that I feel is worth, you know, replacing that slot with, that's when I'm going to take that card to 25. But I'm not going to put a bunch of level 25 gold cards on every single character right away. It's just going to blow through your resources. It's going to blow through your soul gems and everything else, your leveling materials for it. And it's just not going to benefit your account. Keep in mind too that you can switch cards, it's kind of a pain, but you can, you know, take cards, say, off of this person and put them on that person if they share, you know, stats and things like that. So that's what I'm going to fix. I'm not going to ignore it, and I'm not going to dump a whole bunch of resources into cards that just really aren't good, aren't optimized, aren't at least a few stats that I need with the right main stats. So my next mistake, and this is kind of a 2-for-1 again, is delaying my persona investment. And what do I mean by that? If I come to my personas, it's really a couple things. So the first mistake I made was not investing quickly enough in fusing all of my personas as they opened up. So every, I want to say 10 levels, you open the next tier of personas. So it's, you know, tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think maybe through 8. And you'll see them kind of shown here. So these little numbers here. And so as you open them, or as you unlock them, when you fuse them, you get a special currency, if you will, that's used in Wonder Skill Tree, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so by unlocking your personas quicker, you've got a path to make your Wonder stronger. And obviously you get to use those personas sooner. Now, not every persona is necessarily, you know, worth having on your team. There's quite a few that I would never really think to, you know, throw my team on a frequent basis. But it does bring me into the second part of my 2-for-1 here. And that is really focusing on leveling key personas for my team comps. And it's not to say that you can't get through the palaces, you know, with just kind of basic personas and things like that without too much investment. But there's definitely some that would have helped me greatly. So for example, you know, an early one that you want to get is Succubus. So this one is a tier 1. I think you can get it right away. And what's awesome about this particular persona is if I go into their items here, you've got an ability to give crit very early game. And I'll tell you, crit is a great stat to give your team. And so, you know, in the very early levels, had I put her on my team and leveled her up, which I will be doing in global, I would have had someone who can give me a crit buff. And it's not just that. There's certain character teams, for example, your fire teams, where you might want a fire-specific persona that can apply burn. Or you're pairing that with a certain dagger that looks at your elemental affinity and gives you bonus damage, which we can talk about in a separate video. The point is my mistake was I was just kind of throwing random personas out there. I would find one that maybe looked cool or had an AoE I didn't have, and I would make them my focus. And I didn't really think about, okay, how does this synergize with my team for one? And how does that help my stats? Something else to know is the personas that you have equipped do increase your stat pool for Wonder themselves. So you're going to want to have the highest level useful persona you can in your team, as well as those other ones that might be great for your support, like Succubus, like I was just showing you. So yes, my mistake was not investing quickly and as things opened in all of the personas. And when this hits global, my strategy will be, once I cross a threshold and new personas are available, I will focus stamina and whatever else on unlocking that persona. And I'll look at those tiers and say, who is the best for this team, composition that I'm running? Am I running an ice team, a fire team? Do I need certain supports? Do I want crit rate enhancements, etc.? And I'll build that into my strategy more deliberately than I had in the past. So that brings us to tip number 5. What did I mess up? And I kind of hinted at it a second ago, but it was to not focus on my Wonder build really kind of early. And again, this kind of goes into two things, but it's obvious to level your character. That happens just through playing the game. It's obvious to level your weapon, I think. But if you're not leveling the tree, you're just leaving stats on the table. And I'll say that there's probably a very specific or potentially optimal way to do this. And if you're interested in that, drop it in the comments and I'll make a video for it. But ultimately, if you're not focusing on the skill tree by fusing those personas, for example, you're just shortchanging yourself. You're leaving, skill ups out of there. You're leaving, extra life out of there, damage, crit, all sorts of good things. And so again, because I delayed my personas, I delayed the skill tree. And then the other place you can help your Wonder out, kind of, it's maybe a little bit adjacent, is actually through the Velvet Trials. And that is because in the Velvet Trials, in this first one here, this is where you get certain materials to level up Janosik, if I'm saying that right. Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, so here it is. So in these trials, by getting stars, you get a couple things. Besides the gems, you get the other inspiration token, which is what you need to unlock like that bottom track in Wonder, which is how you get like skill rank ups and persona skill rank ups, things like that. And it's also where you get, I want to say, oops, sorry, I clicked on the wrong one there. It's also where you get his persona upgrade material. So the persona that you start with, your main persona, you can level all the way up to I think 99. And I'll tell you, he's used in the end game. So he's not, like a persona that you're going to use until you get your first good fusion, then forget about him. You are going to want to level him up and use him in the end game quite a bit. And so this is where you do that. But again, on the way of getting his materials, you're unlocking these things to make your Wonder stronger. So I did this trial, God, I was maybe into the third palace. Maybe I did a couple, but I didn't focus on actually finishing it till much, much later, instead of kind of as I was progressing along. And what I'll do differently in global is actually finish these battles, and as well as these other ones down here, as I'm kind of on par in level. So it's not that you can walk in here and get all the way down to level 40 and beat this when you're level 10. Like, that's not going to happen. But as you go along, you'll be able to kind of gauge based off your strength and this here on what you need to do. Like, for example, this is level 14, right? So you can definitely punch your up in your weight class. Don't worry about that. And then if I come down to like 22 here, you'll see this is level 64. Am I going to beat a 64 at level 20? I won't. Maybe there's somebody that can. I'm not that person. But for stuff like this, you can kind of go along and say, okay, well, I'm level 60 now. My character's level 60. Now would be a good time to try to get these mats from this specific fight. And so when this hits global, I will be focusing on trying to stay on par with these challenges, getting all those resources along the way, and strengthening both my persona and Wonder at the same time. So there you have it. Those are my 5 mistakes, or learnings, if you will, that I take away from my initial run on the KR server. And if we just speed round them really quickly, it was spreading my resources too thin. So I'm going to focus in on more specific team comps for quite some time. It was not using all my daily action points. So I'm going to be focused on those. And when I do those, I will get gifts for my confidants to level them faster. There was my poor artifact strategy. So I'll be far more deliberate about what I equip, what I level, and when I upgrade to gold, which honestly, gold you don't need until like the end game. It was delaying my persona investment. So we'll be unlocking personas as they come available and making sure I'm getting those really good ones brought into my team for their strategies. And then finally, it was delaying building Wonder, again, because of not unlocking personas, but also not doing those Velvet trials early enough. Those are my 5 big things. If there's anything you want me to go more into depth on, drop it in the comments below. And if you're a veteran, what are some of the mistakes that you made that we should look out for when we get to global? And hey, if you like this video, it would mean a lot if you drop a like and a sub, and I will see you in our next one.